John Adams was born on October 30, 1735, in Braintree, Massachusetts, a community just south of Boston overlooking Boston Harbor. His father, John Adams Sr., was a farmer and church deacon who also worked as a shoemaker and local tax collector. The Adams lineage traced back to Henry Adams, John's great-grandfather, who migrated from Braintree, Essex, England, to Massachusetts in 1638 and founded the first colonial settlement there, naming it after his English birthplace. John Adams Sr. attained modest prosperity and later purchased a farm in Quincy, though the family was not regarded as particularly affluent. John's mother, Susanna Boylston, came from a distinguished family in Brookline, Massachusetts, and married John Adams Sr. in 1734. John was their eldest child, followed by his brothers Peter in 1738 and Elihu in 1741. Adams grew up in a manner typical of a middle-class household in colonial Massachusetts during the mid-18th century. He attended a mixed-gender school where the primary textbook was the New England Primer, first issued in the late 1680s, which stressed Puritan religious principles alongside basic reading and writing skills but offered limited intellectual stimulation. After completing his early schooling, he progressed to Braintree Latin School, where he received a classical education in Latin, rhetoric, logic, philosophy, and arithmetic. The curriculum also reflected the scientific progress of the Enlightenment. Though he excelled in his studies, his independent and argumentative temperament frequently led to disputes, qualities that would later prepare him for revolutionary leadership. During Adams's youth, the eastern seaboard of North America was controlled by British, French, and Spanish empires. Spain governed Florida, France administered New France, covering much of present-day eastern Canada, and Britain possessed 13 colonies in between. These colonies were divided into 3 regions: New England, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, with Boston as its commercial center. The middle colonies, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, known for their cultural and religious diversity and expanding cities such as New York and Philadelphia, and the southern colonies, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, which were largely agricultural and dependent on cash crops like tobacco and cotton, relying heavily on enslaved labor. Although all 13 colonies were subject to British authority and taxation without representation, revolution was not yet Adams's concern in the 1750s, as he concentrated on academic achievement. In 1751, Adams enrolled at Harvard University, the oldest center of higher education in North America. There he cultivated a deep admiration for classical Greek and Roman historians such as Thucydides, Livy, and Tacitus, along with the rhetorical and political writings of Cicero and Quintilian. He was also strongly influenced by Enlightenment philosophy challenging absolute monarchy in countries like Russia and France. A particularly meaningful work was The Spirit of the Laws by Montesquieu, published in 1748, whose arguments about political liberty and equality before the law shaped many future American founders, including Adams. He earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in 1754, completed a Master of Arts in 1758, and was admitted to the bar in 1759 at the age of 24. Around this period, Adams began courting his third cousin Abigail Smith. Their relationship advanced gradually, leading to marriage in October 1764. Built on mutual respect, their partnership saw Abigail often tempering John's sometimes rigid and proud character. They settled on a 9.5-acre farm in Quincy, inherited after his father's death in 1761. Adams soon established a thriving legal practice in Boston, gaining recognition for his analytical skill and professional integrity. Their first child, Abigail, was born in 1765, followed by John Quincy in 1767, Susanna in 1768, Charles in 1770, Thomas in 1772, and Elizabeth in 1777. Sadly, Susanna died as an infant and Elizabeth was stillborn. While Adams was building his career, Britain and France were engaged in the 7 Years' War, a worldwide struggle fought across Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Although Adams did not take part, Britain's victory in 1763, confirmed by the Peace of Paris, resulted in the acquisition of Canada. Many colonists anticipated increased political representation in return for their support, yet Britain instead imposed heavier taxes to offset wartime expenses, fostering resentment and gradually radicalizing leaders like Adams. Adams began expressing his political opinions in the Boston Evening Post under the pen name Humphrey Plowjogger. While he criticized excessive British interference, he initially promoted a cautious and balanced response. However, the Stamp Act heightened tensions by levying taxes on printed materials throughout the colonies. Adams denounced this measure as unjust taxation without representation and drafted the Braintree Instructions outlining his objections. Widespread colonial protest forced Parliament to repeal the Act in 1766, marking one of Adams's first prominent public stands against British authority. Tensions escalated further with the Townshend Acts. After the Boston Massacre in March 1770, when British troops killed 5 civilians, Adams chose to defend the accused soldiers, arguing they deserved an impartial trial. His persuasive defense led to acquittals for most, including Captain Thomas Preston, reinforcing his reputation for fairness and commitment to the rule of law. Later elected to the Massachusetts legislature, Adams grew increasingly disillusioned following the Tea Act and the dramatic Boston Tea Party, during which protesters dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. Adams praised the event as a bold act of resistance and concluded that reconciliation with Britain was unlikely. In 1774, Adams became a leading delegate to the First Continental Congress, helping bridge divisions between radicals and moderates and supporting the Continental Association boycott. When Parliament declared the colonies in rebellion and fighting erupted at Lexington and Concord in April 1775, armed conflict began. At the Second Continental Congress, Adams strongly advocated forming the Continental Army and endorsed the appointment of George Washington as Commander-in-Chief, a strategic move that strengthened colonial unity. Although he signed the Olive Branch Petition seeking peace, he believed it would fail after the Crown rejected it. In 1776, Adams served on the committee with Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston to draft the Declaration of Independence. Though Jefferson composed most of the text, Adams played a crucial role in refining its arguments and vigorously defending it before Congress. On July 4, 1776, independence was proclaimed, though the war continued. The American triumph at the Battle of Saratoga in October 1777 proved decisive, persuading France to formally ally with the revolutionaries. From 1775 to 1778, Adams served on 90 committees and chaired more than 24, overseeing military supplies and logistics with remarkable diligence, often working long hours. He also led diplomatic initiatives to secure alliances with France, the Dutch Republic, and Russia, solidifying his status as a central architect of American independence. He played a central role in drafting the Model Treaty, a blueprint for commercial agreements between the United States and foreign nations. This effort laid the foundation for alliances that would supply much-needed resources and military assistance. Adams's advocacy for building alliances with European powers led to his appointment as commissioner to France in November 1777, shortly after the American victory at Saratoga. France had already been a crucial source of financial and material support for the Patriots, but Congress now sought a formal military alliance. Adams's diplomatic mission aimed to secure France's full commitment, a step that proved vital in achieving American independence. Through tireless work in Congress and a clear strategic vision internationally, Adams became a cornerstone of the revolutionary cause, helping sustain the Patriots during the war's early struggles and positioning the United States to gain essential European backing. Adams departed for France in the spring of 1778 with his eldest son, John Quincy Adams, while his wife, Abigail Adams, remained in Braintree managing the household. By the time he arrived, the French government had already agreed to a formal alliance following the victory at Saratoga. However, Adams encountered difficulties at the French court, where the ministers of Louis XVI preferred the diplomatic charm of Benjamin Franklin over Adams's direct and assertive manner. By late 1778, Franklin was elevated to minister plenipotentiary, effectively sidelining Adams. Feeling unnecessary, Adams returned to Massachusetts in March 1779. His stay in America was brief. Later in 1779, the Second Continental Congress appointed him to oversee potential peace negotiations with Britain. He went back to Europe and tried to advance diplomacy in Paris, but Britain showed little interest as the war reached a stalemate. Frustrated, Adams moved to Amsterdam in 1780 to seek support from the Dutch Republic. Initially rebuffed and denied recognition as official ambassador, he grew discouraged, believing European powers prioritized their own interests over genuine support for America. His health declined, and he fell seriously ill in August 1781, likely from exhaustion and stress. Adams's spirits revived after the dramatic surrender of General Charles Cornwallis at Yorktown in October 1781, following a decisive Franco-American siege. The victory shifted European opinion, especially in the Dutch Republic, where Adams secured recognition of the United States as an independent nation in April 1782 and negotiated a substantial loan for Congress. He then returned to Paris for formal peace talks with Britain, whose delegation was led by David Hartley. Key issues included the boundary between the United States and British Canada, fishing rights off Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, and compensation for loyalists leaving America. Working with Franklin and John Jay, Adams helped finalize the agreement. The Treaty of Paris was signed on September 3, 1783, officially ending the Revolutionary War. It secured independence, defined territorial boundaries, and established international trade rights, marking a monumental achievement and confirming the United States as a respected nation. Rather than returning home, Adams became the first U.S. ambassador to Britain in 1785. In London, he faced the challenge of restoring relations with a recent enemy and major trading power that shared America's longest border. Shortly after arriving, he met George III, and their exchanges were respectful. Still, his tenure was troubled by both nations' failure to fully honor the Treaty of Paris. Americans were slow to compensate British merchants and loyalists, while Britain delayed evacuating forts along the Ohio River. Despite diplomatic frustrations, Adams valued having his family reunited in London. By 1788, believing he had accomplished what he could, he returned home. Meanwhile, the United States was transforming politically as leaders drafted a new constitution and prepared for the first presidential election. The United States Constitution, largely shaped by James Madison with contributions from Alexander Hamilton and others, drew heavily from the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780, to which Adams had significantly contributed. The new framework created a bicameral Congress with a Senate and House of Representatives, a federal system granting equal Senate representation to each state, an independent judiciary led by a Supreme Court, and an executive president chosen through the Electoral College. Designed as a compromise between conservatives and advocates of broader democracy, it established checks and balances to prevent dominance by any branch. Adams hoped to become the first president, but George Washington was overwhelmingly favored. In the election of 1788 to 1789, Adams secured the vice presidency and traveled to New York City, then the temporary capital. Construction soon began on a permanent capital along the Potomac River, later named Washington, D.C. The vice presidency held limited authority, primarily presiding over the Senate. Adams faced criticism for suggesting formal titles for the president, including Highness, which was rejected in favor of Mr. President. Though he cast numerous tie-breaking votes, he called the office the most insignificant ever devised and felt excluded from major policy decisions. His vice presidency coincided with the rise of the first-party system. The Federalist Party, led by Hamilton, favored strong central government, industrial growth, and closer ties with Britain. The Democratic-Republican Party, founded by Thomas Jefferson and Madison, supported agrarianism, westward expansion, and stronger sympathy for France. Adams aligned with the Federalists. When Washington declined a third term, the 1796 election became the first contested presidential race. Adams narrowly defeated Jefferson, who became vice president under the original Electoral College system, deepening their rivalry. Adams was inaugurated on March 4, 1797. His presidency was dominated by tensions with France. Seeking peace, he sent envoys, but the mission collapsed when French agents demanded bribes in what became known as the XYZ Affair. Public outrage surged, yet Adams resisted calls for full war, maintaining neutrality during the limited Quasi-War of 1798 to 1799. Domestically, fears of foreign influence led to the passage of the Alien and Sedition Acts, which targeted immigrants and critics. Though Adams signed them reluctantly, they fueled accusations of censorship and executive overreach. Adams became the first president to reside in Washington, D.C., moving into the president's mansion, later called the White House, in November 1800. His term included challenges such as Fry's Rebellion, after which he pardoned those sentenced to death, demonstrating leniency. However, political divisions deepened. In the election of 1800, Jefferson, running with Aaron Burr, narrowly defeated Adams amid Federalist divisions and public dissatisfaction. Retiring to Quincy, Massachusetts, Adams stayed largely out of politics. His friendship with Jefferson remained strained until 1812, when Benjamin Rush helped reconcile them. They corresponded for years, reflecting on philosophy and history. Adams lived to see his son, John Quincy Adams, elected president in 1825. He died on July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, only hours after Jefferson. Buried beside Abigail at the United First Parish Church in Quincy, Adams left a complex but enduring legacy.